Join former FBI senior forensic examiners Becky Passmore and Stacey Eldridge as they dig into the world of digital forensics, one bite at a time. Now leading their own consulting firms and educating the next generation of cyber sleuths, these badass babes of digital forensics bring sharp insight, real-world case experience, and a dose of humor to the bits and bytes that build today's investigations. From deep dives into business email compromise and ransomware attacks, Becky's specialty, to cracking the complexities of iPhone forensics, Stacey's obsession, this podcast delivers insider knowledge for professionals, students, and true crime techies alike. If you've ever wondered what really happens when the digital trail is all that's left, tune in and start parsing the truth.
Welcome back to Parsing the Truth, one bite at a time. I'm your co-host, Stacey Eldridge, and with me, as always, is Becky Passmore. And we are the podcast that focuses on digital forensics in today's modern crimes. Whether you're here to get the facts of the digital evidence or learn more about the artifacts, we've got you covered. Parsing the Truth, one bite at a time is proud to welcome our first sponsor, Ace Forensics. They are based near Chicago and have been building systems since 1983. Forensics delivers high-performance digital forensics workstations, laptops, and servers to justice agencies across the United States and around the world. They offer unmatched value and the industry's only 5-year digital forensics warranty. Ace Forensics build the systems your digital forensics software deserves. If you're procuring digital forensics equipment, reach out to them for a competitive quote. Now, on to our episode. Becky, what are we up to today?
So today we are continuing our series on this first Karen Reed trial. In this week's episode, we are continuing to walk through the testimony of Trooper Nicholas Guarino, a digital forensic examiner with the state police. Last week, we covered his direct testimony, during which the prosecutors asked him questions. This week, we'll be covering both his cross-examination by the defense and the prosecution's redirect. Let's start with the cross-examination, which opened with a challenge to Guarino's credentials and qualifications.
Otherwise, Becky, you could just call him Trooper or the witness if that's easier, right?
That's probably easier.
Okay. The defense established as they were starting off their cross-examination of Guarino that he graduated from Westfield State in 2003 with a double major in criminal justice and mass communications. The defense stated he chose not to major in computer science. They specifically said that he chose not to. I found that interesting personally.
It's very interesting.
And then they went on to his employment history. He worked as a Norwood patrolman for 10 years before becoming a state trooper in 2015, where he spent 4 years in the patrol division until 2019. The defense noted that he also had completed over 20 online courses and webinars, including courses titled Introduction to Computer Networks and Introduction to Cell Phone Investigation. They stated he holds no degrees in computer forensics or computer science and has no publications in the field and has never taught a course in computer forensics either.
Okay. Immediately, it sounds like the defense's strategy is to point out that he lacks the educational background for this position. They're not saying it outright, but they're implying it. They are pointing out that he doesn't have any sort of computer or technology related degree. They're also pointing out that he took many online classes. While computer science degrees were around when he was attending college, there weren't any digital forensic degrees offered back then.
Yeah, he's a couple of years younger than I am, Becky. So, it said he graduated in 2003 when I looked at his CV. So that's just how it was 20 plus years ago.
Right. There were no digital forensic degrees, and it was a lot of times an IT degree or a computer science degree. So back then, people thought if you wanted to be in law enforcement, you need a criminal justice degree. And many people still think that today. But we're here to tell you that if you want to get into digital forensics in law enforcement, you are going to need some sort of technology-focused bachelor's degree.
Yep. So if people are coming to you as a current digital forensic examiner, especially if they're younger, haven't got their bachelor's degree yet, you might want to share that nugget with them as well. So let's get some other stuff, regarding the jury. I'm not sure that the jury is going to think any less of him because he attended online classes.
Mm-mm.
Today's universities offer entire degree programs exclusively online. I mean,
Correct.
I teach exclusively online. Some of my students have a choice depending, some are in person and online, but I teach exclusively online. And you have a mix of students in your class as
I
well.
have hybrid. I have students that live all around the state of Arkansas and outside of the state of Arkansas and take the degree solely online.
Yep. And the same thing holds true for digital forensics vendors. A lot of them offer their training online. And I was looking for some training from Magnet Forensics. And so, for example, they really offer very little in-person training anymore. I would say if I was going to err on the high side, maybe 1/3 of their training is in person, but they have a ton of online classes. Now, some are on demand and some are live online, but this is just how the direction that the world is moving. Because also, if you don't have to travel to training, that saves on your training budget. So you just sit in your office and not have that travel expense, but you can get the training that you need. So I will say, regarding, the mentioning of the webinars and stuff, I think there is a difference, in my opinion, of attending an actual training class where you earn those CPEs versus a webinar that's free or like a free event. There's tons of great summits going on in the spring every year. Now, I'm not saying those aren't valuable. They totally are. There could be a lot of great things with great knowledge, but, I think you've got to take some of those training courses every once in a while where you can earn those CPEs. And you tend to need that anyways for any certifications that you want to renew as well.
That's right. That's right. Back to the testimony. The defense moved into Guarino's report writing and a chain of custody issue. The focus was on a report he wrote on February the 4th, 2022, just 6 days after O'Keefe was found. That report stated that Trooper Proctor and a sergeant responded to the unattended death of John O'Keefe at 34, and that Proctor secured O'Keefe's phone while on scene.
And so the defense challenged whether that phrase, while on scene, implied that the phone was recovered at 34 Fairview Road. Guarino disputed that interpretation, stating he didn't know where the phone was actually retrieved from. And the defense argued that this ambiguity undermined the chain of custody. And the two sides went back and forth at this for some length. Personally, I think it seems kind of odd to challenge the chain of custody on John's phone. I'm not sure what the gain here would be, but I'm not a lawyer, but that's the decision they made to do this. But again, maybe they're just trying to poke holes into some of the reliability of what Guarino is writing and documenting in his reports. Now, like when I kind of step back and think about it, I think there's two places to get physical evidence. You can either seize it on scene or on site, if you like that terminology better, or someone's bringing it to the police station. Right. And I think even if, an officer responds to a call and they're going to someone's house because they called them and told them to come there versus like a search warrant, that police officer or the agent is still on scene, whatever that location may be. But again, in those situations, that's kind of the consent to search situations. But again, it's either, somebody in the law enforcement agency is physically going somewhere to collect something or somebody is bringing it into the station.
Sure.
I don't know. Am I missing something here, Becky?
No. I think your defense strategy is sometimes working on playing on words. So they're just going to play on a word and make the witness maybe feel uncomfortable.
Yeah.
So, yeah. The defense then moved to the timeline of Guarino's analysis. They established that Guarino did not report on John O'Keefe's location data until April 2023. It did not report on Apple Health data until the spring of 2023. Guarino disclosed that his April 2023 report was written after he became aware of defense expert Richard Green's affidavit, which had analyzed O'Keefe's location and health data.
Yep, and we talked about Richard Green's affidavit. So if you have not listened to that episode on the podcast, go ahead and jump into that, because that was basically our first full-length episode regarding the Karen Reed trial, the first trial. Now back to this case, the defense also noted that no member of the state police's homicide team had looked at or reported on any location data for anyone present at 34 Fairview Road prior to Green's affidavit. Guarino did indicate that he loaded the data into Cellebrite for Trooper Proctor to review earlier in the investigation, but the formal reporting came later. And I will say this is not unusual. Typically, the digital forensic examiner is going to stage something for review by the investigating officer. So in this situation, it's Cellebrite, and they're generating Cellebrite reader reports. And then, the investigating officer gets the report, the reader report, whatever they're looking at, and then the digital forensic examiner will wait for the case agent, the investigator, to respond back and say, what else do they want them to dig into? Do they need anything else? And that tends to happen after that initial review. And Guarino testified to this procedure in open court. And I have also personally experienced this type of workflow when I was in the FBI.
Yeah, absolutely. The next, the defense questioned how the phone was handled after it was seized. Guarino confirmed that placing the phone in airplane mode or a Faraday bag would have prevented further location data from being recorded. He acknowledged that neither method had been used as of 6:15 a.m. on January the 29th, and that the phone continued recording location data until 11:56 a.m. that day.
Now, Becky, I'm not a day-to-day iPhone user. I do a lot of testing with them, and I examine a lot of them, but I'm not using it like as a person using an iPhone. But when I did some testing on my iPhone that was closest to this one, I know that the default setting for when I turned on airplane modes did not turn off the GPS or location data. I don't know, like, you use an iPhone, so have you noticed that? Like, if you put it into airplane mode, does your GPS automatically go off?
Not necessarily. If I put it in airplane mode, I could put it in airplane mode right now and tell you, put it in airplane mode, it does not take off Wi-Fi signal or Bluetooth.
And that's pretty standard anymore. That keeps it on.
Yep.
Because you want to use that stuff on the airplane.
For sure. So, no, and again, it's probably version based, like what type of iPhone was being used at the time, right?
Yeah. Your mileage may vary. So, but I think that's just something to be aware of. Okay, you've got it into airplane mode, you're having them double check that Wi-Fi and Bluetooth are off. Well, now they're going to have to go to another step to make sure that GPS location data is also off, because it may not be off by default. And, we're trying to keep things really pristine here and do best practice. Are you, the main reason for getting it into airplane mode and getting that Wi-Fi and Bluetooth shut off situation is to, eliminate that risk of that remote wipe.
Sure.
But again, as you can see what's happening here in this trial, they're saying, well, why is all of this GPS data logging? What procedures weren't followed? So that's how it's coming into play here. I did see in some of my research that you could say, hey, Siri, shut off. I don't know if you have to say, I can't recall now. Say like, hey, shut off GPS or location. And you could do that while the phone is locked, allegedly. So that might be something for listeners to experiment and,
Sure.
based on your findings and what you want to do in your agency, maybe tell people, hey, if it's locked, try, hey, Siri, disable the location and see how that works. Otherwise, as I mentioned in the testimony, you can put the cell phone in a Faraday bag. And then as we're kind of educating people here, make sure when you put that cell phone in the Faraday bag that it's completely sealed. Do not have the cord sticking out of it for like power charging, because then that will act as a antenna. So that's not good either. Hopefully, the idea is that you can quickly get the phone to the evidence lab, and then they can handle it properly. So the battery's not going to die while it's in that Faraday bag. And that's another reason you have it in airplane mode, because if you can't get it in airplane mode, it's constantly searching for the signal and it's going to die very quickly. Now, we've also heard people say for years, like, if you can't get the Faraday bag, you can put the phone in a paint can. Disclaimer, make sure there is no paint in the paint can.
Right.
And then there's the old trick of, aluminum foil, the foil lined potato chip bag. I think that is your absolute last choice, is to use the potato chip bag. Again, there should be no potato chips in the bag. It should be cleaned out. You use what you got. You're trying, but I'm kind of mentioning the potato chip bag back in the day, and conspiracy theories and all of that stuff again. But hey, get a few Faraday bags, share those around, and, protect that phone. That's the point of all of this long conversation here. Anyways, continuing back to the testimony, Guarino confirmed that by 6:36 a.m., it could not have been O'Keefe moving the phone, since he was already incapacitated at that point. And that means that any movement registered after that time would have been caused by someone else handling that device.
Yeah, so the defense then challenged Guarino's interpretation of the Apple Health data, specifically the step and stair climbing entries. He acknowledged that 170 steps recorded between 12:11 and 12:21 a.m. and could not be pinpointed to a specific moment within that window. And the same was true for the 80 steps recorded between 12:21 and 12:24 a.m.
Then regarding the stair climbing data, Guarino maintained that Cellebrite showed a specific timestamp of 12:22:14 a.m. for ascending or descending 3 floors. The defense pressed on whether those stairs could have been ascended closer to the start of the time window, which could still place O'Keefe at 34 Fairview Road shortly after arrival. Guarino's position was that Cellebrite gave him this specific data point and he relied on it. Now, I reviewed his written report, and we'll link to that in the show notes, but he does not note a specific artifact or a database that he was looking at for that data point. But if it's coming from one database, that database only ever contains ascended floors. But if it's coming from a different database, then that database can contain flights that go, either up or down. But that database logs the actual direction in that record. So regardless, if you are reviewing the actual raw data from the database, you can make a determination if it's up or down. It is never, ever either or. The tools might just not parse it out for you, and you might not know what they are telling you.
That's right. The defense then got Guarino to agree to 2 specific statements. First, his conclusion was that John O'Keefe could not have been at 34 Fairview Road at 12:22:14 a.m. because Waze placed him on Oakdale Road, approximately a half a mile away at that time. Second, this Waze data led him to disregard or fail to attribute the Apple Health data stair climbing entry to O'Keefe at the moment.
From there, the defense moved into another significant area of discussion or testimony, and this is the 3 clock discrepancy in iPhone timestamps. They're asking a lot of questions about the 3 clocks. So the defense is asking whether the apps on an iPhone can pull timestamps from 3 different clocks. Now, when the line of questioning begins, Guarino is first thinking, based on his answer, more along the lines of the way that time is stored on the iPhone, such as in UTC time or Mac absolute time. And you have to remember, this is cross, so you don't know what's coming, and you're just, let's be real. You're saying the first thing that pops into your head most of the time. They're saying clock, he's thinking time. And in digital forensics, we don't spend a lot of time discussing clocks. The focus has been on time. Like, what format is it stored in? How do I parse it out? What time zone are we talking about? That sort of situation. But once Guarino understood the question, he identified the 3 clocks and he identified them as monotonic date time, the baseband date time, and the display date time.
The defense introduced Exhibit 640, a printout from John O'Keefe's phone extraction referencing process 3434, which was identified as a Waze artifact. That exhibit showed that the monotonic clock read 2:22 a.m., while the baseband and display clocks were 3 minutes earlier. Guarino admitted he did not know which clock Waze was using when it placed O'Keefe's phone on Oakdale Road at 12:22 a.m.
And you've got to wonder here if the defense was implying that this 3-minute discrepancy could potentially explain the conflict between the Waze location data and the Apple Health data showing the stair climbing at the time. During his testimony, Guarino did not agree with that conclusion. He attempted to explain that Exhibit 640 was coming from the power log file, and that power log file has nothing to do with GPS data. But the defense did not allow him to fully explain his position. So we'll see if the prosecutor caught this and asked him to clarify some of this information during the redirect.
Right. So the defense then moved to ask questions about Jennifer McCabe's phone data, which became a spicy area of the cross-examination. Guarino confirmed he had generated a Cellebrite full file system extraction report from McCabe's phone, dated May 31st, 2022, under Cellebrite version 7.53.0.29. This report, remember, this is a Cellebrite report only, not the actual extraction. This defense noted that the report didn't contain anything close to a full file system extraction, and that it had been filtered to return only Jen McCabe's communications with Karen Reed, Carrie Roberts, John O'Keefe, and Kaylee Furbish. Guarino said that was not correct. He said it was not correct. There were a couple of objections from the prosecution. Then when Guarino was asked if the full forensic image of Jennifer McCabe's phone was not shared with the defense until they requested it in October 22, 2022, Guarino said that was not correct.
Yeah, I noticed the lawyers still say like full forensic image a lot in this trial. So, we'll have us die hard. I don't know if they completely understand the difference, but maybe that's why it was not correct, because there was no full forensic image to provide of the phone. I don't know if we're getting,
Right.
into that tit for tat sort of situation. But anyways, Guarino admitted he did not look at McCabe's phone extraction until he was prompted to do so by the Richard Green affidavit. And in Guarino's April 24, 2023 report, so that's not too far after that affidavit was released, that is when he formally and for the first time disclosed the 3 Google searches that have been talked about a lot in this trial that came from McCabe's phone. And so the first 2 searches are the how long to die, or excuse me, I got the timestamps mixed up here, but there's 2 of them. So there's the how long to die in cold, and then how long TD in cikd. And he documented both of those in his report. And then he also reported that there was a record showing an unanswered call at 6:23 a.m. that had a 0 duration for the time. And then that was found in the call histories WAL file, and it was also marked as deleted by Cellebrite.
So a third search, House Long to Die in Cold, was found in the browser state.db WAL file using a newer version of Cellebrite Physical Analyzer version 7.61.0.12. That third search at 2:27 a.m. was marked as deleted by Cellebrite. The defense also introduced evidence of 2 deleted calls from McCabe's phone to her sister, Nicole, listed in the contacts as Coco, one at 6:07:42 seconds a.m., lasting 9 seconds, and one at 6:08:17 a.m., lasting 7 seconds. Both answered and both marked as deleted by Cellebrite. The defense then pressed him to admit that neither of those searches was provided in his April 24, 2022 report.
The defense pressed Guarino on whether these items were marked as deleted, and he confirmed that they were, but he was attempting to explain the context behind the deletion markings, but the defense redirected him to simply confirm what the label said, and if the label said deleted. The defense also showed him a document on a laptop, which Guarino said was incomplete, and he had not created that PDF, and that PDF had no source. And the defense pointed out that his name was on it. Guarino clarified that his name would appear because he generated the UFID extraction, but he stated he did not personally create that particular document. So this seems like another good point regarding the items being marked as deleted that should be revisited during the redirect. So we'll see what happens.
Cross-examination closed with questions about Karen Reed's phone data. Guarino confirmed that no phone calls were deleted from Reed's phone on January the 29th, 2022 between 12 a.m. and 4:30 a.m. She called only her parents 2 or 3 times, and she conducted no Google searches between 12 a.m. and 5 a.m.
Now, Guarino did note that several Google searches were deleted from Reed's phone in the afternoon of January 9th, but confirmed there were no deleted calls. And he stated that he received a version of Reed's phone report from the AG's office, but he could not speak to what had been redacted from it.
Now we move to the redirect, which was conducted by the prosecution. The Commonwealth gets a chance to clarify anything that came up during the cross-examination. Guarino's qualifications came up again briefly, and he outlined his certifications in cell phone report creation, extraction, and cell phone repair, Burla, motor vehicle forensics, and an advanced Cellebrite database course called CASA, which covers deeper database searching.
On the question of the phone recovery and the chain of custody, Guarino was asked about it, and he stated he doesn't know who recovered O'Keefe's phone that morning. He only knew that it was found underneath O'Keefe's body and that it was then taken to Canton PD. So, I mean, if he knows that, then again, that's why he's saying on scene. Makes sense to me personally.
The prosecution then asked about location data after 6:15 a.m. Guarino stated he observed intermittent native locations, meaning original on-device file path data parsed by Cellebrite, showing the phone at Canton PD for a handful of data points, then back at the office when he placed it into the digital evidence lab and powered it on. No GPS locations appeared from approximately 11 a.m. until he received the phone at 7:30 p.m. on the 29th.
Okay, so it looks like at some point they did some extra steps and got the GPS location data to stop logging, disabled, what have you. So that's great that they got that fixed. Now, regarding the airplane mode, they testified about, the fact that it was placed into airplane mode at some point, though Guarino couldn't recall whether Trooper Proctor had done so before handing it off or whether he did it. It would seem to me that perhaps it was done before Guarino received it, since there were no more locations logged at 11 a.m. And then they had some discussion about who in his unit perform cell phone extractions. And Guarino noted that it was only himself and one other trooper that performed the data extractions and forensic analysis of the cell phones. Now, there are other troopers that they have been trained in Cellebrite and how to use the reader reports and things like that. But it sounds like the actual extractions and probably even the analysis is delegated to Guarino in most cases.
On the question of data integrity, Guarino explained that manipulating extracted data would require entering the folders and deleting files, which would alter all associated data and likely cause the extraction to break. All extractions are stored as encrypted files on a server, allowing reports to be recreated if needed. He observed no manipulation or deletion in the encrypted files in this case.
He also did note that they did not have the passcodes for the phones initially, not for O'Keefe's phone. They didn't get that until the 31st of January. And then for McCabe's phone, they didn't have that until August. And they didn't get that until the programs that I believe it was GrayKey was able to determine what the passcodes were to get into those phones.
The prosecution asked Guarino to walk through his review of Richard Green's affidavit. He explained that he had not gone through the phones in detail because he was not as familiar with the case details as the investigators were. Once he received Green's report, he went through it step by step, confirming each claim or determining why it was incorrect, partially incorrect, or misinterpreted.
He also stated that in reviewing the data, he ended up consulting with Chris Vance of Magnet Forensics. He said he was a head forensic specialist there, and they were discussing this at a cybercrime conference. He showed Vance what he was seeing and asked why it was being marked in a certain way. Now, an objection came along and prohibited Guarino from sharing what Vance told him. Now, from there, Guarino contacted Cellebrite, and then this whole entire matter was eventually contracted out to Jessica Hyde, who had already testified as a third party to examine the data. And it was also escalated to Ian Whiffen of Cellebrite. And Ian Whiffen also testified in this case before Trooper Guarino as well. But basically, these two other examiners were brought in because, in my opinion, it seems to be because of that 2:27 a.m. alleged search for the house long to die in cold that was found on McCabe's phone. Now, nothing was really said in open court as to why. So you've got to draw some conclusions there based on what they testified about. Now, what was the strategy behind it? Did the state want the additional examiners to bolster their case since they disagreed with Green's conclusion? Did they feel it would be more powerful to have someone from Cellebrite saying that they disagreed with Green's conclusions regarding that 2:27 a.m. search of house long to die in cold? Again, some of these are decisions that are being made as part of the prosecution's strategy. What do they feel they need to be said and shown in the courtroom in order to demonstrate that Karen Reed is guilty beyond a reasonable doubt?
The health data is discussed once again. Guarino clarified that the steps category in Apple Health data indicates the phone detected movement, not necessarily that actual steps were taken. He stated that an Apple Watch paired to the phone would provide greater accuracy because it would also record heart rate, which would correspond with elevated step counts.
Then, when asked why he looked just beyond the health data, Guarino explained that all the artifacts, GPS points, and the health data need to be considered together as a whole. He noted that one artifact might suggest one thing, but 5 others could contradict it, which is why everything is reviewed collectively. Now, I love the fact that he got to say this in open court. You can't just look at one artifact in isolation. We've said that before. We'll say it again. We're saying it now, and we'll keep saying it. But you have to examine the totality of the evidence and the artifacts in your case.
That's right. The GPS data indicated that O'Keefe's phone arrived at 34 Fairview Road at 12:25 a.m. The prosecution then addressed the document the defense had introduced, which showed 3 different timestamps, which the defense had suggested were related to Waze. Guarino clarified that these timestamps came from the power log file, a database tracking battery levels and power consumption, and it had nothing to do with the Waze navigation or GPS positioning. The power log showed O'Keefe's phone never turned off overnight. The battery dropped to approximately 17%, and Guarino noted that the phone being under O'Keefe's body actually helped preserve it from dying. The timestamps in that document reflect when the phone was plugged in and charging, and the entries show only that Waze was drawing power from the phone, not when it was opened or when an address was entered.
Now, regarding the Cellebrite software versions, the prosecution asked Guarino to explain how differences in versions affect what is visible in the reports. Here's the key word, reports. Now, Guarino's initial report was created using version 7.53, and it did not parse the house long to die in cold search that was logged a timestamp of 2:27 a.m. from that browserstate.db WAL file. Now, Cellebrite informed him that starting in version 7.55, that's when the capability to parse out that record from the browserstate.db was first enabled. Now, defense expert Richard Green used version 7.61.0.12, which is why the artifact appeared in his report, but not in Guarino's original report. That version 7.61 was not available at the time that all of these initial extractions and initial reports were being generated. They said it came about 10 upgrades later. So when Guarino reloaded his extraction in version 7.53, the artifact was still not present. But when he loaded it in version 7.61, it was present.
Guarino's opinion on the timing of McCabe's Google searches was that they occurred at 6:23 and 6:24 a.m., with a third at 10:35 a.m., not at 2:27 a.m., as the defense suggested. He stated it is physically impossible to search for two things simultaneously. McCabe's phone showed she was searching for her daughter's basketball team and listening to music. He stated his belief that the searches attributed to the defendant's request occurred a few hours after 2:27 a.m., consistent with what McCabe herself described.
Now, regarding the WAL file and the deleted call log entries, Guarino explained that the entries marked as deleted in a WAL file are removed automatically by the system, not by the user. And this happens either when the program closes or when a maximum data allotment for that page is reached. So he's restating the stuff that he said originally in his direct testimony regarding the WAL files and how they work. Now, regarding the calls to the contact listed as Coco in McCabe's phone, Guarino stated that there should be 2 additional locations in the database where those calls appear. He did not believe that this deletion was user initiated and characterized it as phone initiated because of the WAL files first in, first out process that it uses.
The redirect closed after the lunch break, with Guarino confirming he was the only one who created Cellebrite extractions in this case. Aside from the AG's office, he confirmed that deleted material was found on defendant's phone from the afternoon of January 22. Specifically, search items were not present on the phone itself, but cookies related to those searches and the websites visited were recovered. The deleted content pertained to search terms and web browsing history, and it was the cookies related to those searches and visited websites that were found.
Yeah, so this is the conclusion of Guarino's testimony in the first Karen Reed trial. We've discussed all 3 portions of it, right? The direct, the cross-examination, and the redirect. Becky, looking back on all of his testimony, is there anything you want to loop back around to kind of dig into a little more, or just food for thought?
Yeah, so, to educating our listeners about just being aware how the justice system works and the court strategies work, and how you will be asked questions on direct, and then you have a cross-examination, and don't get frustrated and aloof and defensive because your prosecutor will come back around and redirect and ask questions to clarify some things.
Yep.
And just understand that, that part of the strategy is still trying to attack someone's education, even though, like you said early on, we see so many of courses being offered completely online, very well taught online. Should not minimize the education that people receive just because it's taken online instead of in person. And just to
I guess don't put, I don't know what his CV said, but just don't put that you took it online. Just list the name of the class.
Right, exactly.
That solves that problem for everybody.
Right.
Now, if the title, because we have a couple of different virtual summits going on right now, and the title of it is Virtual Summit, so obviously you can't change the name of that. But if you're taking a regular course, like a week-long course, don't put that you took it online, and that just eliminates that.
Right.
Because it doesn't matter how you received it. It doesn't matter where you were sitting when you took it.
Education is education. And if you learn something from that education, you take something from that education and, work it into what you do on a daily basis, then it shouldn't be minimized. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think our digital forensics community is really great about getting the facts out to everyone else, and they don't want everything behind a paywall. So there are lots of free opportunities. That's why they have these virtual summits, because even though a virtual summit might be put on by a vendor, is by far examiners out in the field doing actual work, and they are coming on to present information and research, and it's all driven by the fact that they had to figure out something for a case. And so now they're here to share what they figured out, so you don't have to repeat those same steps and go through all that time. It's a lot more time effective. And again, it's helping make sure as an industry, as a forensic science discipline, that we are getting things right.
Right. And that continues our education, right? That's part of
Yep.
that's part of your credentials, is your continuing of education. And so there's nothing wrong with taking courses online. And so sometimes you just have to sit through and let the defense attack what you have, and you cannot minimize it, because it's as important as, a 4-year college and going and attending every class in person. It's still important.
Yep. Well, and of course, once the tables are turned and, the defense is bringing up their primary witnesses and doing their direct examinations, the prosecution is going to come back and do the exact same thing when they cross-examine that witness.
Sure.
They're just going to be like, poke, 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 because they're trying to just draw attention to, like mistake, misattribution. They're just trying to be like, oh, look, I think they're just, the strategy is to get people to think there's a mistake, another mistake. Oh man, they're messing up all the time. Like, how reliable is anything that they're doing? And so that's just their job. Both sides do it. So, I mean, we're just talking about Guarino's testimony here. So in this case, it was the defense trying to poke holes in everything that he did.
That's right. All right. Well, if you are enjoying these episodes, please leave us a review wherever you are listening.
Yeah.
It really helps us to expand our reach. And until next time, stay safe, stay sharp, and as always, keep parsing the truth one bite at a time.
If you enjoyed this episode, make sure to follow us to get notified the next time a new episode drops. If you can do more, head on over to parsingthetruth.com and donate by clicking on the donate button. Parsing the Truth is a nonprofit organization, and we are raising money to send a new digital forensic examiner to IASIS training next year in Orlando. Thanks.